be such a thing as global warming. At any rate, the minutes from March 3rd, any errors or omissions? Mover and seconder of the minutes then. Mover, Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Next, we have a committee of adjustment. So I need a mover and seconder. Committee of Adjustment, the Township of Malahide, be called to order at 7:30. And at Mayor Dave Bennell be appointed chairperson of the Committee of Adjustment. Mover and seconder. Widner and Jaguar, all in favor? Carried. Adam, can you give us an overview of the application, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first application is a minor variance to allow for the replacement of an accessory structure for rural residential property. We can see on page 31 of the agenda package where there's an existing smaller structure being removed and being replaced by a more permanent structure at a location that's still, although it's further inset from the easterly property line, it's going to be further. It still will not be in compliance with the zoning bylaw requirements, but the assistant planner has done a thorough job with the report. Standard conditions requiring that it be built within 1 year and that the structure be constructed as per the application. So unless there's any other questions or concerns, there's nothing further to add to my report.
Okay, thank you. Allison, was there any additional information?
Through your worship, there is no extra comments received other than what was included with the report.
Anyone in attendance? Sir, have you got any additional comments?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Mover and seconder, report number DS22-08, entitled Minor Variance Application number D13MV0122 of Stephanie and Ken Farrell. Affected land is described as Part Lot 21, Concession 9, Southern Division, former geographic township of South Dorchester, Township of Malahide, Part 1, RP 11R8906, 46998, cross the Hunter line, be received. The Township of Malahide Committee of Adjustment approved the minor variance application number D13MV0122 to permit the construction of an accessory building 10.9 by 1.4 meters, garage shop with a height of 6.29 meters, approximately 20 feet, to be situated 1.5 meters, approximately 5 feet from the eastern side lot. Approval is subject to the following conditions, and there are two conditions. So mover and seconder for that. Lewis, Widner, all in favor? Carried. Next, we have another minor variance. This is by Michael Lemko and Melissa Harris Lemko. Application number D13MV0222. Part Lot 74, concession north of Talbot Road. Part 1, RP 11R1783, geographic township Malahide. Adam, can you give us an overview, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a very similar application than the one that preceded it. A smaller accessory structure is going to be replaced by a larger, more permanent structure. It'll require relief from the zoning bylaw on two fronts, one being the side yard, interior side yard minimum, as well as the maximum floor area. So as noted in the assistant planner's report, the accessory structure will slightly be slightly greater than the floor area of the dwelling, but such can be common on rural residential lots, those sort of lots that are in that are larger and surrounded by vegetation and farmland. It's going to be used for the storage of a recreational motorhome and enclosed trailer. So unless there's any other further questions from the committee, there's nothing to add to this report.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Melissa, have you any comments on this application?
She's not here at the moment, actually.
I'm sorry?
You're looking for Melissa?
Yes.
Yeah, she's not here at the moment. I am. I'm her husband, Mike.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't have any comments at the moment, actually.
All right. Allison, was there any comments received from outside agencies?
There was nothing received other than what was written in reports.
Any questions from the committee? Mover and seconder. Report number DS-2209 entitled Minor Variance Application Number D13MV0222 of Michael Lemko and Melissa Harris Lemko, and affecting lands described as Part Lot 74 concession north of Calvert Road, Part 1 RP 11R1783, geographic township Malahide, 9846 Springwater Road be received. Township of Malahide Committee of Adjustment approve the minor variance application number D13MV0222 to permit the construction of a 223 square meter, approximately 2,400 square feet, accessory building to be situated on 1.8 meters, approximately 6 feet from the southern lot line. And the following conditions, and there's two conditions. Mover and seconder, Serta and Widner, all in favor? And one more minor variance. This is by Tony and Esther Weeb. Application number D13MV0322, Part Lot 7, Concession 4, Part Lot 1, RP 11R740, Township Malahide. Adam, can you give us an overview?
Certainly. So if the committee can reference page 64, we can see that the lot here is not your typical rural residential lot in configuration. It's very wide and it's very shallow, and the house is oriented in a manner where to put an addition on the back of the dwelling will not meet the minimum rear yard requirement of 10 meters. So 7.3 meters will still be achieved. I think in this regard, in a typical environment, those standards would be appropriate, but in this regard, there's farmland to the south, so all we'd be looking to ensure is that vehicular movement, or if they were doing construction on the west side of the property, they'd be able to get equipment through. That'll still be achieved in this. Oh, sorry, my computer's going so odd there, but anyways, nothing further to add to my report.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I don't think the applicant is here. Allison, any comments from agency or landholders?
No, there was no outside agencies' comments other than what was reported.
Okay. Any questions in committee? Mover and seconder, report number DS-2212 entitled Minor Variance Application Number D13MV0322 of Tony and Esther Weeb, affecting lands described as Lot 7, Concession 4, Part RP 11R740, in the Township of Malahide, 48737 John Wise Line be received. Township of Malahide Committee of Adjustment approved minor variance application number D13MV0322, permit the relief from the minimum rear yard depth requirement of 10 meters, approximately 32 feet, in order to construct an additional single detached dwelling on the subject property, which have a minimum rear yard depth of 7.3 meters, approximately 24 feet. Approval subject to the following conditions, and there's two conditions. Mover and seconder, Jaguar, Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Oh, yeah. Okay. Mover and seconder, the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Malahide be adjourned, the council reconvene at 7:40. Mover and seconder, Moore, Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Next, we have the road needs study is Matt, are you presenting this, or is who's presenting this?
We have the consultant, Dave Anderson, who prepared the road need study doing this presentation.
Okay, Dave, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Okay, just a second here till I get some stuff off my screen. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to undertake the work and to present this report. Generally, I understand you have a full agenda tonight, so I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. I realize it's a fairly lengthy presentation. So we'll talk
Can you
about
just increase your
definition.
volume a little, Dave?
Is that working any better?
It's a little better.
Okay, I'll do that. How's that?
Okay, we're good.
Okay, thanks very much. So we'll talk about asset management at a high level. In a general way, we'll talk about asset management in Ontario. We'll talk about the plan and the plan development. And what we'll try to do, in effect, is look at the requirements of Ontario Regulation 588.17 and how we've integrated the report with those requirements. And that includes developing the work plan, developing the budget, and then we'll talk a little bit about Malahide specific issues. Basically, Fort Roads works across the province, and Malahide has been a client since 2008. Asset management, I used to have about 12 slides with 12 different definitions, but basically this definition seems to fill the bill. Asset management's a framework for making cost-effective resource allocation, programming, and management decisions. It combines engineering principles with sound business practices and economic theory. It provides tools to facilitate a more organized, logical, and comprehensive approach to decision-making. So whereas that comes from the Transportation Association of Canada, we can really apply this definition to any asset. And from a very high level, municipalities are in the business of delivering services. To deliver services, you need assets. You need the roads, bridges, water, wastewater, etc. So maintenance of assets in good condition is critical to ensuring the service delivery. And almost every aspect of service delivery falls under the asset management umbrella. There's a lot of definitions and there's a lot of key themes that are recurring in these definitions about managing, being strategic, effective, efficient. It's certainly about money from different perspectives. It's about service delivery, optimizing asset life cycle, and risk management. And risk management is from the two perspectives, financial and from a physical perspective. So everything pretty much falls under that asset management umbrella that we have to do as a municipality. So I've taken this from a document the province prepared in 2012. It's very appropriate. So asset management requires a thorough understanding of the characteristics and condition of infrastructure assets, as well as the service levels expected from them. And now I've underscored the line at the bottom, and it says finally requires the development of a financial plan, which is most critical. So a lot of times what goes backwards is the plan is created around an existing budget when exactly the opposite is supposed to happen. It's supposed to have the knowledge of the system, and you're in pretty good shape. Spoiler alert, you're not looking that bad in terms of budget and things like that. So asset management is a team effort, and ultimately the leaders of the team, that'd be council, have to be responsible for the whole rollout of the program. And cross-discipline and department interaction is required because it's not just about roads. There's roads, and the roads are a utility corridor, so we have water, sewer, other utilities in that corridor. But if you have an underfunded plan, that's generally a plan to fail. So in Ontario, we had an asset management regulation came into effect the end of December 2017. It required a policy by July 1st, 2019, which generally everybody has. And I'm maybe making a note of that because it's something that has to be followed up on with regularity. It required an asset management plan for the core assets by July 1st, 2021, which was revised to be July 2022. And the core assets would include roads, structures greater than 3 meters, and anything related to water and wastewater, linear treatment, and certainly stormwater, which would include the linear and then the stormwater ponds. The regulation required a policy, and the policy is really a big rock in terms of it's more than a typical municipal policy. And it should be revised regularly, because as you go through the learning curve, and every municipality, not just Malahide, everybody is going through this learning curve with asset management. And in the initial policy, as you go through the learning process and developing a lot of internal processes, you'll find out that, oh, maybe that should be updated. Well, it has to be updated by regulation, but maybe a bit more frequently as there's discoveries made. Some of the key things that we have to talk about is, and what was deliverable in the report was, creating a work plan that would sustain the condition of the assets for 10 years. We discovered what the condition of the asset group was, and then we have to use, according to the regulation, I've underscored item 4 there, the life cycle activities referred to in subparagraph 2, which can be undertaken for the lowest cost. So it basically says, do the right treatment at the right time. And if you're working at the road that's in good condition, keeping it in good condition is the most effective way to manage the system. So I suggest that you really need a tool to do that. And I believe you do have the software tools to do that. This is strictly a reference page. There's a lot of regulations that are be required to be followed to undertake the business of the Public Works Department and a municipality in general. Here's a few that would play into asset management for sure. The key takeaways is that a work plan is required for the core assets by July 1st, 2022. So it looks like you're in reasonably good shape to do that. The plan has to be adequately funded. I think we're ticking that box as well. The plan has to sustain or improve the condition of the assets over time. And firstly, has to select the lowest cost activity at the correct condition. So the right treatment at the right time. We could do lesser cost treatments on a poor condition road, but you're throwing away your money. That's really what it's getting at there. So we'll talk a few minutes about asset management at a high level. What's an asset management system? It's more than just the software. So a lot of people think if we buy software, we've got an asset management system. That is just part of the system. The system is how the business is executed, in effect, a standard operating procedure. So this is an excerpt from ISO 55000, which is an overview of an asset management system. It's a little more clear on this slide here. What we're talking about is we have our assets, which is surrounded by the system, and then overall asset management, and then managing the organization. So that asset management system is really a set of interrelated or interacting elements to establish asset management policy, objectives, and processes to achieve those objectives. So it's more than just software. Assets are at the core of our business. Council's involvement and understanding is critical because you're ultimately responsible, and the regulation requires that the executive lead and council sign off on the work plan that is developed for the asset management plan for the regulation. So the more informed everyone is, it's easier to further communicate that information, because council will then have to communicate that to the ratepayers also. So it's an opportunity to explain the rationale and potential outcomes if or if not the plan is followed. So asset management is very interesting because it's complex and simple at the same time. It's simple when we discuss it in principle and at a higher level, and it's complex when we get into the details. And I always think we have to follow a bit of an iterative process to keep both of those perspectives in view, because it's too easy to get your head into the details and not look up and see which way the plan is taking you. So it's really important to do these high-level studies and look at the condition of the system overall, and then get into the details and the granularity of what the reports should be. It's also dynamic. It's not one event at a time, and it has to be ingrained into our work processes. So it's dynamic because we could change one number. We could change the price of surface treatment or the price of hot mix asphalt. That changes the whole plan in effect, because that one number rifts through every treatment that involves that number, which then can give you a different picture. So when you do a report, it's on the information that we have today, and that could change with different information, be it condition or pricing or whatever. So the current answer might change. So the concept of the plan being dynamic has to be instilled throughout the organization as well. So asset management's a state of mind and an ongoing process, and you have to understand what you need first. We talked about software as part of it, but buying the most expensive software may or may not be for you. So understanding the concepts is key to using or purchasing a software that would be used to develop a program. As I said, it's dynamic and the information is regularly and frequently updated, or at least it should be. Malahide, I've been involved with, as I said, since 2008, and it has been updated on a fairly regular basis over that time period. So the reporting on it should be similarly frequent. And it's important because it allows changes in trends to be identified and dealt with. So for instance, you might be adequately funded, but not picking the right projects, resulting in a deterioration of the system over time. So the review of the condition at that high level over time allows us to make that determination. So it balances the cost, the risk, and the benefit. Regardless of the asset type, we have to get a system or an asset group condition. We do the needs analysis, which your report is, and then we come up with an economic and budget analysis, which also is included in your report. We implement the program and we repeat. So asset management is part of our everyday life, and it's an ongoing cyclical event that we have to keep on top of to deliver services. So in concept, we talked about earlier in the regulation requiring to do the lowest cost treatments, effectively doing the right treatment at the right time. So if I look at the graph to the bottom center of the picture on your screen there now, or the slide on your screen, you can see at that top end of a hot mix asphalt road, the top end of the curve, we're doing preservation type activities, which either increase, typically preservation and crack sealing, et cetera, hold the condition, rather increase the condition. But as we go down the deterioration curve, the cost of those treatments becomes more expensive. One of the misleading things about some of the nomenclature, if you will, in the report and in the methodology we use from the inventory manual is what is a 1 to 5 and a 6 to 10 year need. A 1 to 5 and a 6 to 10, it's really a prediction model. And it's predicting that given the condition it's in now, it will be a major rehabilitation or reconstruction in 1 to 5 years or 6 to 10 years. So if you look at the graph and just take any one of the lines and look at going 10 years forward from a resurfacing project, you can see that that puts us in a poorer condition. Similarly with structures, which is the graph on the right center of the page. And you can see that by doing the right treatment at the right time on the structure, we can extend the life significantly over time. So understanding your own road system is really important. So I have two different kinds of road systems shown here. And all I'm really trying to illustrate is the top graph might be more representative of something from a county level on down, including a county. And the bottom one might be a model from a DOT or a 400 series road where they got a much deeper pavement depth. So understanding your own system is important to developing that plan. There is a perception that once you buy software, all you have to do is push a button. And the reality is quite different. Significant effort is required. So you've probably heard this from your staff already, but you really do need people, processes, and technology. If you don't have all three, then the initiation of the asset management program isn't going to work. So you don't need the most expensive technology or software, but you need all three to, processes, people, and technology. So to develop an asset management plan, we need software of some description. It's much easier in software than just trying to wade through piles of paper for this. We need a condition rating format or methodology, which is for any asset group, accurate condition data, treatments and their effect on the asset. What does resurfacing do to the asset? Does it increase the condition? Does it extend the life? And then we have to categorize the assets as to how we think they're going to perform, and we do need a budget. So the software selection is already been done. The Township of Malahide has an enterprise software solution. Condition evaluation methodology, we'll talk a little bit about. So we, in accordance with Regulation 58817, the agency has to have a description of the municipality's approach to assessing the condition of the assets in a category based on a recognized and generally accepted good engineering practices where appropriate. So we've used the inventory manual for municipal roads. Prior to 1995, this was the manual or the methodology that was followed to get grant funding from the province. So we're in line with the requirements of the regulation there. So generally though, for any type of asset, there could be different rating methodologies. So whatever your agency ends up selecting, and you may change your methodology over time, it's really just important to know and understand the rating methodology that you are using and have that understanding, because basically you've got well over $100 million in assets just in roads, and to manage those assets requires expertise and understanding the evaluation and what might come out of that. This is just a comparison chart of different methodologies, and you can see that what's described as good, fair, poor does vary between the methodologies. And again, just reiterating the message that know and understand your system that your agency uses. In order to develop a budget and a work plan, we need to know what a valid unit cost is. So those were provided by the Malahide staff. And I would suggest going forward that you update those costs annually so as you can make sure that you are keeping your budget in lockstep with what the real costs of doing business or delivering services are. This is just a cross section of the types of unit costs that go into the background calculations to determine, a resurfacing project or a reconstruction project, or even using something as simple as gravel road resurfacing. We need to know an accurate cost of gravel that's placed on the roads for the resurfacing. So when we do the needs study or you do the evaluation, the segment condition, or it could be a bridge group, you've established a bridge condition, but the segment condition is established through the rating methodology. When we roll that up into a high level for the system, we can take that as a level of service measure, which should be enshrined in your policy, your asset management policy. The average of all ratings, well, average as it suggests, average can be a problem on a road system because of the different lengths of the segments. So what I prefer to do is go with a weighted average, and then looking at the system adequacy is really the ratio of the fair, good, and excellent assets to the entire system. That's a historic measure that the MTO used to ask for prior to 1995 and prior to that. I still include it in the reports. It can be a bit misleading because you could have a system that's 100% adequate and all roads score 36. At 35, they become poor. So one year you could have 100% adequacy, the next year is 0. Now that's an extreme, kind of exaggeration, but it's just the simple mathematics of it. So that measure alone could be misleading. So that's why I usually recommend more than one level of service measure to be put in your policy. And your target can vary by your agency. So a different type of agency, like an MTO, will have a different target than a county and a different target than a township, et cetera. I like this graph to describe how we arrive at a recommendation for what the condition should be, mostly because there's no numbers and there's no timeframes. So it could be applied in concept to just about any asset. So in our case here, a 14 out of 20 or a 70 out of 100 is the trigger for a pavement rehabilitation, like a resurfacing. So basically, if I was looking at this graph from the Transportation Association of Canada, I'd say that the average condition of the system has to be above 70. So that's the basis of where some of the recommendations in the reports come from. Once you've done all your data collection, which includes dimensional information, ratings on ditches and things like that, we have a set of data that can be used for a real cross-section of analyses, because we know what we have, where it's located, what condition it's in, and what the recommended improvement is, what its cost is. We know its current value, remaining life, and we also know the replacement cost. So those are all useful pieces of information to move ahead. So looking at the Malahide system constitution, what do we have? Well, we have, and these numbers are adjusted for boundary roads. So if it's a boundary road, the length has been cut in half. But it's, 262 kilometer road system with about 20% of the road system being gravel, 4% being hot mix, and 76% being surface treated. And then looking at the bottom graph, we have what we call functional classifications, and you can see we have our rural, semi-urban, and urban ending up at the same amount in the split. So we know what we have. We have developed a geodatabase, which translates into the thematic map. This one just shows the road sections, but we now know where it's located. And we've related it that way, and that has been provided to the township as well. What condition is it in? Well, we have a couple of different ways of looking at it here. So we have taken the structural adequacy, and the average structural adequacy is 14, which is in a good range to be in. So that's just at the trigger point for our recommendation. And then we've got a graph or the table at the left-hand side, the good to very good roads. So, good to very good roads. I might have the numbers reversed there. I have to apologize for that. Your system is in reasonably good condition. In accordance with Regulation 58817, we also have to measure, and it's a confusing measure, and I'm not sure how it's going to be used, but it's basically taking the lane kilometers of each of the arterial, collector, and local roads and dividing them by the surface area of the municipality, which gives us the level of service measures. Again, I don't know how they will be used, but we have the weighted average overall condition, and a condition for the paved roads and a condition for the gravel roads. So that's all looking reasonably good. As I said, I've looked at the system a few times, 2008, maybe 14 or 15 and 18, and then 21. So you can see here that the system condition has come up since 2008, been relatively static, but at a good level since 2015 or 16. So the budget is adequate over the near future timeframe, but as you'll see from one of the recommendations, ultimately you should go to that full replacement cost budget, but this will sustain the assets over the near term. When we look at the recommended improvements in costs, and just going back to that, what do we have? Where is it located? What's it cost? We have here a $28 million of improvement costs. Now, that's not all now needs. It's divided. Now is a now broken road, and the 1 to 5s and 6 to 10s are prediction models. Adequate roads are low volume, or they just need some crack sealing or other preservation type activity. So the roads were not reviewed during spring breakup period, which would probably be occurring next week in your area. They might reduce the overall score of the road system, but improvements on gravel roads in the report, where there's a gravel road improvement, they're all costed with the idea that, ultimately you convert them to hardtop. That would be a fuller dialogue on that would be in Appendix D of the report. So your replacement cost is $131 million. Current estimated value is $105 million. So that doesn't include storm or sanitary treatment or linear sidewalks, bridges, or culverts. And we've broken it down in the graph below by roadside environment. So $131 million is a significant amount of assets that require maintenance over time. One of the requirements of regulation is to create a work plan or develop a work plan. So we have done that, and you can see from the work plan that the system condition will be maintained or increased over time. The only caveat is that the software and the modeling assumes a perpetual pavement. And what that means is that, once you've reconstructed a road, all you'll ever have to do is resurface it. So that's not quite right, but I think for the 30 or 40 year time frame, that's fine. So basically, we're looking at a reasonable performance over time of your current budget. This is how Public Works is viewed some days in terms of money. So high level budget. So we need a high level budget. It's really a function of the constitution of the system and the current costs, and it provides that order of magnitude and a check. So on a very simple level, we're looking at how many kilometers of hot mix, surface treatment, gravel do we have? what does it take? What's the average cycle that we have to undertake to resurface those roads? And what are our average life expectancies? So that depends on your system, depends on the design, the structure, the maintenance, and the programming. So it is a fairly complex matrix. So if you change one element, the performance over time can change. We've seen the unit costs, but all of those unit costs go into developing that budget. Simple calculation. We use standardized calculations from the inventory manual. So something as simple as a basic resurfacing on a rural road, the formula looks like that. You can see in that box there that there's allowances for contingencies and engineering and terrain and things like that. It gets a little bit more complex if we go into an urban system, but again, it's a standardized way of looking at replacement costs, and those can be customized, but for the purposes of this report, that's the type of information that we wanted to look at. So there's some other things that you might want to consider for funding level considerations and analysis going forward. So all municipalities submit an FIR report annually to the province, financial information return. The province does use that information to assess some grant funding applications. So the cautionary note is that all municipalities at the very highest level, you might be able to compare. But if you get down into the granularity of the information in there, you may not be able to compare head to head. For instance, some municipalities don't have equipment rates. So their cost to do winter control, for instance, might look a lot lower than yours. So, you know, those kind of differences have to be understood when you're looking at the information. But regardless of comparisons to other municipalities, doing some of the measures I'm going to talk about on your own system by your own staff are really good exercise. So the FIR reports are based on the financial statements prepared in accordance with the Public Sector Accounting Board, PSAB standards, which are audited by professional accountants. FIR and audited financial statements are required by the Municipal Act. It's not voluntary. If the FIRs are not submitted by September 30th, you may have some funding withheld. And there are maybe differences in the FIR based on practices, as I mentioned earlier. And accounting policies could also affect the results. So for instance, your tangible capital asset policy, the TCA policy, with respect to useful lives and amortization methods, will have a huge impact on TCAs and net book value and the amortization expenses. So we have to keep that in mind. So just a head-to-head comparison may not be accurate. So even with the differences that I've noted, you can make high-level relative comparisons. How do you compare with other municipalities? So you can sort the municipalities by population density and overall population, things like that. Get some head-to-head comparator for taxes by house, for household, reserves, debt, net book value, and then determine for your own selves if you're above or below the provincial average. And then you could look at your agency-specific measures. And we'll talk in the next slide or two about the asset sustainability ratio and the asset consumption ratio. So this is, I sometimes partner with a firm called WSCS Consulting, and they are an accounting firm and management firm. And I've taken away the identifiers, but this will give you an idea of the kind of comparisons you might want to do. If you look at like municipalities, you can see where your tax level, for instance, is relative to the provincial average and make some decisions based on that. You could also look at the asset sustainability ratio, which is the capital additions as a percentage of the amortization expense. So the target's greater than 90%, but we got to remember amortization is the historic cost, not the current cost. So being greater than 90% may still leave you with a declining system condition. And then the asset consumption ratio is the closing amortization over the historical cost of the tangible capital assets. So you want to be, the target's less than 50%. So you want to be consuming less than it's aging, might be a way of describing it. Reserves per household and the debt burden per household, these are all measures that are looked at. And it may not have happened to your agency, but some agencies, municipalities across Ontario have applied for grants and not got them. And it's because they have an ability based on this type of analysis to provide more funding themselves. So considering these previous slides as an indicator, you might want to look at your situation. And I don't know that because that wasn't part of this study at all. But the debt's low and the tax is low. Are you underfunding assets? So if all of those things are occurring, your eligibility for a grant from the province might be reduced. What I like to do, and you'll see in the report, and it's in the executive summary as well as later in the report, I like to look at different funding levels, long-term sustainability, short-term sustainability, and in between those two amounts is the funding window. And in your case, we've determined the long-term sustainability the long-term sustainability number is $2.6 million a year. And that's based on simply the $130 million over 50 years. The four numbers in the second white block there are the programs. And what I do is I add up the programs to come up with that, as is seen in the lower part of the slide, 1.3 million. And that's my short-term sustainable funding number. And then I've got my long-term. It might be easier to explain if we look at this slide. So what we're showing here is we have a funding window. We have the the low and the high of that, and we've shown by the light green dotted line your current funding. So you are above the short-term sustainability number, which is a good place to be in. The recommendation is to head to that top number. The blue line that jags up and down is basically the dollar value on an annual basis to sustain the funding. So that's kind of interesting when we can put that in context of the concept of the long-term funding level. You don't need to spend that every year. The suggestion is put that in a reserve. So when there is a demand on the system, like you see with those spikes to keep the condition at the right level, the money is in the reserve and it doesn't result in a blip in the tax curve or something like that. So performance modeling is how we develop a work plan. So we can apply this concept to a lot of assets. So we develop a deterioration curve, which is basically a graph that tells us how an asset is, and we anticipate an asset to perform over time. However, it does depend on quality throughout the entire process: design, materials, construction, and maintenance. If you don't have one of those elements, the asset will not perform as we anticipate. So it's important to understand how your agency's assets perform, and measuring the condition over time. You will be able to customize that over time. And understanding materials are critical to performance of just about everything in public works world. So we have to understand those basic products. I just draw your attention to the bottom of this graph, which is states that it was created in 1983. I've been using this in presentations since about 1997, and it really does tell the story. So the province, through Regulation 588.17, says that we got to select the lowest cost activity, maintain the condition of the assets. So what that's really saying is we have to, if a road or an asset's in a good condition, we would pick those activities that are above that $1 level. And you can see if we miss that window, the cost of improvements accelerates greatly. So I've reused this same graphic because it's a really important one. So you got to keep the good roads good and do the right treatment at the right time, or the good asset good. So we could apply this to bridges. So this is the same curve. And just to put it in perspective or context, at the top end of the curve, we're doing our gravel road resurfacing, surface treatment, slurry or micro or other preservations. And then we reach that $1 level, which is the surface with one lift. Then as the condition deteriorates, we got resurfacing with 2 lifts and major rehab or reconstruct. So what you have over time is a decreasing return on investment, which translates into an increasing cost. Some agencies like to split it between an operational capital cost, but from an asset management perspective, if you're doing the right treatment at the right time, you might have a significant length of roads that should be done, surface treated, for instance, in 1 year. So if you artificially limit that, then it's going to cost you more in the long run. So I like to refer to the amount that we put in the budget as the reinvestment amount. When I slide under that slide from 1983, you can see how this all fits together, and the messaging in asset management is still the same. So the absolute minimum outcome of the model should be to maintain the overall average of the group, hopefully improve it. And it is a requirement of OREG 58817. So performance modeling should optimize that available funding, picking the right treatment at the right time. And to test the model, we should have an estimate of the range for desired funding, which we do. So we've come up with what we think the funding should be. So suggesting that we think about the money that we put into our assets in a little bit different way constitutes a paradigm shift for a lot of municipalities. And so instead of considering operations and capital, we might want to consider the entire amount as a reinvestment amount. And as I said, those arbitrary limitations through categorization as capital or operating will result in reduced performance at a given funding level. So keeping in mind the requirements of the regulation is we got to maintain the assets. We got to maintain the current levels of service, and we have to pick the lowest cost activity to maintain those current levels of service. So translating that, this is not from your system, but it's a similar budget amount, just a bit over $2 million. But what it looks like is I plotted up treatments versus the gross budget. And you can see over time that the treatments and the cost for a given treatment varies significantly from year to year. The budget does not, and then we're calling that a reinvestment amount because we have a real mixture here of operating, what might be considered operating and capital costs. So we're really illustrating that we can create a program that meets all the requirements of the regulation. So there's different ways to calculate or push the model, if that's a way of describing it. So the return on investment, or the area under the curve, is effectively what's required by OREG 58817. We can push it in different directions, and I have a graph coming up. We'll show you that you can do that with the same dollar value, but it's not going to have the same outcome. So return on investment aligns more closely with the requirements of the regulation. And here's what I was referring to. So you could take, and everybody likes the low dollar value. Oh, maybe we could go with the that low dollar value on an annual basis. If you do that, you have to basically do what the model says in order to get the performance that you want. You can't take the dollar value for short-term sustainability and then start doing reconstruction projects before you do the projects or the treatments that would be at the high end of the curve. And this illustrates basically same dollar value and return on investments, the green line at the top, and the orange line is doing essentially worse first. So picking construction projects over the maintenance or the high level maintenance projects, you'll see a difference in performance over time. So gravel road conversions are a good asset management practice. We'll talk a little bit about Malahide specific issues. Should continue that. Gravel roads were not inspected during the spring breakup. The interval between retreating surface treated roads should be reviewed. It looked like some might be a little bit beyond the 7 years, but that was just from an observation. Overall drainage in the Springfield area should be reviewed. It might require a master drainage plan. I don't know if one exists. And there are roads that are too narrowed by the design standards on just over 10 kilometers of the roads. So can you fix all those 10 kilometers at once? No, but it would be a good idea to put up signage that says caution, narrow road. So there wasn't too many really specific issues there. As a general commentary, the system is in pretty good condition and has been maintained in that condition, relatively stable for the last 6+ years. So those are good news stories. So just there's a number of recommendations here. The information and budget recommendations included in this report should be used to further develop the corporate asset management planning. So integrate this with the bridges. And you'll have to include your water and wastewater for your asset management plan in July. Funding levels should be increased to the long-term sustainability limit over a 10-year period, because we're seeing you're above the short term, those incremental increases. You don't need to spend the $2.6 million every year, but if it's in the bank or in a reserve, then when there is a problem or there's something crops up, you're able to act on it. So, and on a similar note, there should be a separate funding source for structures, and go through a similar process for structures to create an annualized funding level for structures. Put that in a reserve every year. You won't need to spend that amount every year, but then when you do need to do structure work, because it's usually quite expensive, then there is money in the reserve. So the funding levels should be adjusted to accommodate system growth or expansion, as well as inflation. The work plan should include the preservation and resurfacing programs, and that they're optimized. This is particularly critical for those sections that are not going to be affected by upgrade due to development demands. The work plan should cross-integrate assets, and really all that means is you don't go and resurface a road where you need to replace the water main in that 5 to 10 year horizon. So the work plan should be followed to optimize investments and performance of the road system. The inspection interval should be no greater than 2 years. You're a little bit greater than that, but you're still in a good range. So might be something that you want to consider going forward. Gravel road conversion should be continued as part of that long-term asset management strategy. Again, if you refer to Appendix D of the report, there is a graph on there, and it shows you a significant difference in dollar value over time for maintaining a road that's reconstructed to a hardtop surface versus a gravel road. The traffic count should continue to be updated and repeated on a regular basis. That is a really good exercise, and should include the percentage of trucks. Roadside safety audits should be undertaken to assess potential safety requirements in rural road sections with potentially substandard alignment. I put that in as a standard recommendation. I think Malahide has done a roadside safety audit some time ago, but I just like to refresh that. Narrow roads should be signed accordingly. Boundary road agreements should be reviewed to ensure that we understand who does what. That's really important in the case of an accident, for instance, or a claim on a boundary road. The current level of service measures that we've listed here for system adequacy should be a minimum of 60. That's from the previous Ministry of Transportation standards. You're currently at 92.9, the caveat being we didn't look at the gravel roads during spring breakup. The average condition should be 70, you're at 70.71. And the level of service for good to very good roads should be a minimum of 60, and you're currently at 67.9. So this is all looking reasonably good. The soils there are such that I think they're fairly forgiving, so that's enhances the ability to keep the good roads good. Quality assurance programs should be reviewed and refined by developing a minimum testing criteria for a number and type of tests be undertaken to confirm quality construction for development and township projects. I didn't see any major quality problems per se as I was reviewing the road system, but during discussions with staff, we talked about, how do you handle development and how do you describe what kind of tests you'd want to do to keep on top of that or keep control of that. So consideration should be given to the development of a maintenance paving program for roads that are in poor condition and will not be addressed in the shorter term programming. And what I mean by that is if you follow the program, there might be roads that are, because we're picking roads at the top end of the curve, there might be poor roads that reach a state where there's a lot of maintenance going on, and it would be more effective to put a holding strategy on those roads, and that would be the maintenance paving program. Development of a corporate asset management system. So that's really a standard operating procedure throughout the organization and identify what constitutes a valid data entry in a field and what the rating methodology is going to be corporately for the different assets and things like that. I spoke earlier about the developing a separate funding source for the structures, and similarly, consideration should be given to development of a storm sewer system as a supported utility, which would be the same as you're doing with your water and wastewater system right now. I finished my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for the presentation, and certainly it's always healthy to have a third-party assessment of our roads. And if I can encapsulate everything you've said, I think we're ahead of the curve, but don't let our foot off the gas. Is that a
That's
fair assessment?
I think that's a good assessment, yes.
Okay, all right. I'll open it up to questions from council. Doesn't appear to be any questions. You either baffled us or way too much information, one or the other. Dominique?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's actually a question for staff. There are obviously 19 recommendations, so I'm wondering, is the plan for staff to analyze those recommendations and perhaps come back to council with which recommendations you intend to implement?
Matt?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's exactly the intent. I was hoping to bring this presentation from the consultant to council to be received and then share the full report with council, now having the backing information presented by Dave here. And then a number of these recommendations have been implemented into the long-term budget going forward and how things are going to be funded, and also the asset management planning that Dave mentioned, as that we're due for July 1st to have a lot of these recommendations are implemented into that plan as well. So that's exactly the right take.
Any other questions for staff or Dave? Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Dave. It's a good report. One thing I found over the years, what we sometimes get it like is inferior products. We really have to keep an eye on what is delivered to us and be testing it constantly. Like inferior gravel and inferior surface treatment, that kind of thing. So is that common with other municipalities that you see?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, decades ago, I was a municipal person for over 30 years, and sometime in the 80s, I developed a buzz phrase was you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And I think it's really important that the quality of materials does get checked or does get monitored. And that's why there's the recommendation there of, we're going to do so many tests per 1,000 tons, or we're going to be, doing those kind of things. So we ensure that, what we specified is what we're getting. So quality control and quality assurance are two sides of the same coin. So quality control is what the contractor should be doing to ensure that they're delivering what you asked for, and quality assurance is what the municipality or the agency should be doing to ensure that they're getting what they asked for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know over the years we've had several roads we've had to have redone, but we kind of stipulated a 2-year warranty on some of ours. I think that's really saved us a lot of money over the period of time. So, thank you.
Any other questions for staff or Dave? See none. Mover and seconder. Presentation from Dave Anderson of our 4 Roads Management Services, Inc., relating to the Township of Malahide Road Needs Study 2021, State of Infrastructure and Asset Management Plan for Roads be received. Winder and Cerna, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Good night.
Night.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
To you, Mr. Mayor. This is the report. This is for the February review of services we provided in February. Calls were pretty standard throughout the month. Only one thing to add to the report that was not on the report, that the pumper that was damaged in Port Bruce did not need a motor. It is a repairable engine, so it has been repaired. It is running. We're currently waiting for another issue we had with the pump that's not flood related to be repaired at the same time, and a couple other small issues from the flood itself. We should expect the truck back probably in 3 or 4 weeks. So,
Okay.
if there's any other questions, I'm be happy to answer them.
So we still have a truck from Central Elgin that is filling in the back?
Yes, your mayor,
Okay.
we have a truck from Central Alga that's their spare pumper from Yarmouth Center, and we have it until we don't need it any longer.
Okay. So it's injectors, is that what's going in?
Yeah, that's correct. It's, the injectors need to be replaced.
Okay. Questions for Jeff on the report? Mover and seconder report number F2206 entitled Emergency Services Activity Report, February be received. Mover and Galinsky, all in favor? Carried. Is Sam going to do a report? There he is. Hi, Sam, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you for having me here this evening. So first report I believe I've got on for you tonight is the Malahide Water Distribution System 2021 Section 11 and Schedule 22 summary report. So these reports have been provided to council prior to this evening's report. The Section 11 annual reports required to be completed by February 28th of each calendar year. And the Schedule 22 report is required under Regulation 170.03 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, that be provided to the owners of the system prior to March 31st of each calendar year. So the reports have been completed in accordance with those requirements. And the main highlight, I guess I would note, is that in 2021, the MECP inspection found no non-compliances or with any regulatory requirements. And the system received a mark of 100%. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the report.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Questions for Sam on his first report? Seeing none. Mover and seconder report number PW 2218 entitled Malahide Water Distribution System 2021 Section 11 Annual Report and Schedule 22 Summary Report be received. Linsky and Jaguar, all in favor? Carried. Next report, Sam.
Thank you. Through your worship. So the next report relates to PLC upgrades, which are programmable logic controllers, essentially the hardware components located at each individual water and wastewater site that are connected to what's known as the APAM SCADA. So SCADA, as the council is aware, is a supervisory control and data acquisition system, which provides continuous monitoring, alarm notification, historical data, trending, and generates regulatory reports. It also allows for operational control of the system. So the original system was integrated in roughly 2008, and the original integrator of the system was SUMA Engineering Limited. So they have provided ongoing support and maintenance since the time the system was created. And I guess I should highlight, this is a joint project. So the APAM group consists of Elmer, Port Burwell, the Port Burwell area secondary water supply system and the Elmer area secondary water supply system, as well as Malahide's sites. So the township, as council is aware, are the administering municipality on behalf of both of the secondary boards. So this project will be carried out with the owner representation being township staff working in partnership with SUMA and Aqua. So the need for this project essentially is there is a need, it's an asset management related topic similar to what's been spoken about this evening. So we are required, essentially there's several components to SCADA. It's very complex and I won't get into all the details, but there's a couple of high points I'd like to make. The PLCs, as I mentioned, have a physical life cycle of approximately 12 years, whereas software and servers have a life cycle of approximately 6 years. So the PLCs that are still in use today are from the original construction of the SCADA system, and they are no longer manufacturer supported, and they have they cannot be replaced with spare parts. It would be, if one were to fail, it could cause a significant downtime for a site. And so really this project also goes in conjunction with an upgrade that was completed in 2020, where the server was upgraded to increase capacity, and all software was updated at that time as well. Had that not taken place, today's PLC implementation would not be possible because the capacity in the server was not sufficient to allow for this upgrade. So through staff's understanding and recognition of the needs of this system, they sought a proposal from Summa Engineering, recognizing the need to maintain the life cycle assets and ensure these are completed at the regular intervals to offset potential costs of unexpected or emergency repairs, and also to ensure the reliability of the system is maintained. So the two sites that apply to the Malahide Township budget within the report are for the PLC replacement at the Springfield Sewage Pumping Station and for the PLC replacement at the Copenhagen Booster Station. The Ontario Police College Sewage Pump Station was not included in this project, but I would note that this lines up nicely with the new PLC that was installed for that facility and will line up for future life cycle replacements nicely. So it was not included, obviously, in this project, but the funds for the project were budgeted and approved by council for the 2022 budget in the amount of $18,000. The project did go slightly over that mark, just around $60 over for each site, so not a significant amount, and that will be drawn from reserves if approved. And I guess I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the report.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Any questions for Sam on his report? Seeing none, mover and seconder, report number PW 2220, entitled APAM SCADA PLC upgrades be received, and there's a recommendation before you. Mover and seconder. Lewis and Jagger, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Adam, you've got the next report on council remuneration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a legislatively required report under the Municipal Act, just reporting on council's 2021 total compensation. I have nothing further to add to the report.
Thank you. Questions for Adam? None. Mover and seconder, report number FIN 2206, entitled 2021 Statement of Council Remuneration be received. Lewis and Zerna, all in favor? Carried. Allison, procedural bylaw?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you are all aware, the 2022 municipal election is set for October 24th. Since the last municipal election in 2018, the province has brought forward changes to timelines in relations to the term of council. Section 6, Part 1 of the Municipal Elections Act states that a new term of office shall begin on November the 15th. This change in legislation does not align well with what our current procedural bylaw states, as the inaugural meeting should be held in December. It is being recommended that to better align with this change of legislation, that the procedural bylaw be amended to make the third Thursday in November following the election as the date for the inaugural meeting, to align with the 2022 term and future terms of office commencing on November 15th. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Allison. We don't have a lot of choice in this one, so we gotta pretty well have to adopt it. Any questions for Allison? Mover and second, report number clerk 2205, entitled Procedural Bylaw Amendment, Inaugural Meeting be received. The procedural bylaw amendment be to make the third Thursday in November following the election as the date for the inaugural meeting, to align with the 2022 term and future term of office commencing on November 15th. Moore and Cerna, all in favor? Carried. And the lame duck.
Yes, so this report discusses the possibility of being in a lame duck situation, either between nomination day through to the end of current council term, or from voting day through to the end of current council term. This is dependent on the number of current councillors that run again and then who is elected. If neither of these situations occur, council would not be subject to a restricted act, period. However, in order to prepare for these potential restricted periods, it is being recommended that a bylaw be prepared delegating authority to the CAO during this time if it is required for those restricted act items. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Allison on this one? Seeing none. Report number Clerk 2206 entitled Restricted Acts, Nomination Day, Election Day, lame duck be received, and there is following recommendations. Moving seconder, Serta and Jaguar, all in favor? Carried.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Rick.
if I may. Yeah, thank you. I don't know what everybody's planning, but we're talking about nominations and election days. And I just want to let everybody know that I do intend to run again, but not in Port Bruce. Because they are not happy campers down there. And I still stand by what I said. And it wasn't meant to be a blanket thing for everybody. But when you call for a rescue, after you've been offered a rescue and then you refuse it again, that's not good thinking to me. When you drive your car into a 4-foot high thing and your engine's submerged and you have to leave it there, that is not common sense thinking for me. So I know they're a little ticked. I will not apologize for what I said but it's only meant for those people that I don't know what the hell they did. I just don't know why. When you got 3 feet of water going across a road at 100 miles an hour, and you're worried about me driving through there at 5 kilometers an hour because I might cause a wake? Like, come on. Unbelievable. That's all I got to say. But I'm not going to, I'll run, but not in Fort Bruce.
Maybe a wise decision. Where are we? Okay. Severances. Is Monteith Brown, or are you going to handle this one? See him. Is Dan there? There he is. Dan, the consent for David and Mary Thiessen?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The application before consideration tonight for at least some support from council essentially dates back to 2020. At that time, official plan amendment number 19 was, as you may be aware, adopted by council and subsequently approved by the county. What that did essentially was amended the Malahide official plan to provide for the proposed consent that's before you tonight. It's a consent that would add to the existing lot occupied by Creative Enterprises, almost doubling it in size. And the policies of the official plan are set out so that that is now recognized. It gives some legitimacy to the existing use that is there, recognizes it as an industrial use, and it also at the same time recognizes the expansion of that use onto the lands that are being conveyed. There was a zoning bylaw amendment that was applied for back at the same time as the official plan amendment. that zoning bylaw amendment was tabled until such time as the OPA was approved and the consent was moved forward in the process. We have evaluated this from a planning policy perspective and take no issue with it. And we are recommending that the consent before council be supported. It will be coming up to the Land Division Committee for consideration later in the month. And there are also some recommended conditions attached to the report for council's review.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Certainly in the past, we've supported this application, whether it be a zoning or the severance, and certainly they've been an important part of the community. So council has supported this in the past, and I suspect they will support it and continue that support. So any questions for Dan on this application? Seeing none, mover and seconder, report number entitled Application for Consent to Sever of David and Mary Thiessen be received. Application for consent to sever of David and Mary Thiessen relating to property located at North Part Lot 24, Concession 3, Part 2, and Part of 3, Part 11R5617, former geographic township of Malahide, Township of Malahide, and known as 51553, Colton 9 be supported for the reasons set out in this report. This report be recommended conditions be forwarded to the Land Division for its review and consideration. Blinsky and Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Next we have outside boards. We have one from the Long Point and one from the Aylmer and Area Secondary Water Supply. Any questions or comments on either one? Motion receive and file. Cerna and Widner, all in favor? Carried. Correspondence, there is 12, I believe. 12 items on correspondence. Anyone who wish to make comment or support? Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see us support 11, the town of Mono, the resolution calling on the federal government to provide greater support to Ukraine in the fight against the invasion of the sovereign territory by Russia. Some of the images we're seeing are just heartbreaking, and it's just unfathomable that this is happening in this day and age. So anything we could do, I think, would be helpful.
Certainly, I support that one. Any other one? So we are supporting number 11 and receiving and file the ballots. Mover and seconder for that. Lewis and Jaguar, all in favor? Carried. Long Point Financial Report. Any questions or comments on that one? Seeing none, mover and seconder report. Long Point Regional Conservation Authority 2021 annual report and 2021 annual financial statement be received. Lewis and Moore, all in favor? Carried. And also the Kettle Creek, any questions or comments on that one? Mover and seconder, the correspondence received from Kettle Creek Conservation Authority regarding the 2022 levy be received. Jaguar and Galinsky, all in favor? Carried. And the catfish, any questions or comments on the catfish? Seeing none, mover and seconder, the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority 2021 financial statements and 2022 final budget be received. Mover and seconder. Cerna and Widner, all in favor? Carried. Any old business that we need to discuss? Or any new business?
Just have
Other
something
business? Mark?
For new business, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some residents of Crosley Hunter have asked for consideration of some hamlet name signs. There's no name signs in Crosley Hunter. We have them pretty well everywhere else, but they just asked for consideration. So for budget, we could have a look at that if we could. I don't know what the process was. We've done it before in several spots, but I guess if they ask for it, maybe that'd be the first step, so. Yeah,
Okay, we'll
something-
turn that over to staff to come back with a recommendation.
Were you gonna mention Cecil?
Yes, I will mention Cecil, and I did, I did pass a message on to Cecil after 22 years, that Cecil is moving on to new territory, and certainly over the past 2 years with COVID, Cecil has been instrumental in getting us up and we're still keeping the wheels on the bus and getting our communication and so on going. So Cecil, thank you so much for your dedicated services over the last 22 years. And we wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure.
Okay. I think we should give Cecil a round of applause. Yeah. Anything else under other business? Bylaws. Mover and seconder, bylaw number 22-15, be a bylaw to reduce the speed limit on the portion of Crossley Hunter line, be given a first, second, third reading and properly signed and sealed. Mover and Winder, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 22-16, being bylaw to amend bylaw number 20-74, rate of remuneration for the members of council, be given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed. Lewis and Jagger, all in favor? Carried. And closed session, do we need a motion to defer that? Allison?
Yes, you can have one to defer.
There's been new information in regard to the closed session on both items. And so it was recommendation by staff that we come back with a refined assessment and that we defer it for the immediate time. So I need a mover and seconder to defer for the closed session. Cerna and Winder, all in favor? Carried. Mover and seconder, bylaw number 22-17, being a confirmatory bylaw, be given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed. Serta and Moore, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Mover and seconder, the council adjourn its meeting at 8:55. To meet again on March 17th. This is March 17th. April 7th at 7:30. Kalinsky and Widner, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone, for attending.